The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 102 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. From Studio 1905 at the Prince Waikiki Hotel in Honolulu on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. On today's flight, Captain Roger and I are joined by Alex Daigle to discuss his journey, the exciting transition to his first 121 carrier, and we also scratched the surface of some recent events in the aviation industry. You might remember Alex from Flight 98, 5G, and Discovery flights, where he exercised extreme patience with my GA flying skills. We here at Squawk Ident look forward to having you join us as we prepare to depart on Flight 102 of the Squawk Ident podcast.
We'll make it better. We'll make it better.
Do you know anything about planes?
Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 102 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. Joining us today is an exceptional aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, Falcon 900, 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his mobile podcast studio from the Courtyard Marriott in Mesa, Arizona. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
Well, Tony, it's good to be back. I'm excited for the show. It's, I haven't been on for a while. I forgot my mic. My internet's unstable, so I'm on my phone with a funky view of myself, and it's, we're just gonna go wing it. So I'm excited. I feel like I'm at my best in these situations.
Yeah, well, sometimes the winging it is just what we do.
Well, I figure it's the expectations. The expectations are that much lower, and so the lower the bar for me, the more I feel like the possibility for me to meet or possibly even exceed them. Because otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, my father always used to tell me, son, if you set the bar low, you won't be disappointed.
Wise man. Wise man.
Well, also joining us today, I know this was a kind of a last-minute idea to record the podcast. I'm here on a 30-hour layover in Honolulu. I've love Honolulu. I went for my run this morning, got my great meal, and then I thought, wow, you guys want to record a podcast? And both of you were like, yeah, let's do this. So without further ado, let us introduce our featured guest today. He was featured on Flight 98 of the Squawk Ident podcast, where he and I went up in one of the flight school's Cessna 172, something that I had not done for years, actually over a decade, since the last time I was in command of an airplane, by command meaning manipulating the controls of a 172. And Alex was very patient with me, and we actually had a chuckle. There's some YouTube videos out there on the Squawk Ident YouTube channel of the event. Some of the laughter we had after my bounced landing. If I'm being kind, I can call it a bounced landing. It was not a good one. But yeah, he was very patient with me. It was just an absolute pleasure to go up with one of our listeners, and now a featured guest. He is a U.S. Navy Reserve's Chief Information Systems Technician, a CFI at Riverside Flight Academy, and soon to be a newly minted first officer at Sandpiper Air, the alias that we use as Legacy's wholly owned regional airline. At least one of them. Joining us from his approved podcast location in his Temecula home in sunny and windy Southern California, help us and welcoming to the show, Mr. Alex Daigle. Alex, how you doing?
Doing good, Tony. It's a pleasure to be on here. Pleasure to meet Roger. Been listening to you guys for a long time, so it's now nice to, put faces with voices.
Yeah, I mean, we've been going back and forth now for a while. I've had the honor to answer a few questions that you've had along your journey. And it's really part of the main reason I wanted to start a podcast, is because when I was going through and working on my ratings and learning how to fly and make the mistakes and learn from them and learn about my hazardous attitudes and all the plethora of things that you do in flight training, I really didn't have anyone to go and ask about what the industry was like, at least real time. The few people that I was introduced to, like captains and whatnot, or operators at a corporate business, they had gone through their flight training years ago, if not decades earlier. So the advice they gave me, I found to be a little out of date. So the Squawk Ident podcast was born. And it was for the reason of trying to spread current information on what to expect, at least at this level, not just in the airline industry, but in the aviation industry. And, Alex, I'm very proud to say that you're one of the first listeners that started communicating with us, and we've been going back and forth now for a little over a year. And it's just fantastic to have you on the show. So welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you created something like this, because there isn't much out there for the transitional period, going from a CFI into 121 world. There's plenty of podcasts for getting started. There's plenty of podcasts for once you're established, but there's nothing in the middle.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for saying that. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the transition and what to look forward to. Now, I've been relatively busy in the past few weeks, as you can tell, because there haven't been that many shows produced since probably the holidays. But now, as things are starting to get back to normal in both my flight schedule and the flight schedules of our crew here at Squawk Ident, we're happy that we're able to produce a few more shows here a month than we were previously. Now, in this show, first thing I wanted to do is talk about your journey in aviation and introduce you to all of our listeners out there. So, Alex, how did your journey start?
My journey started when I was a young kid. My dad is now a retired Legacy Airlines captain, flew for them for 28 years. So my journey started super young, being, with my dad on different flights going around the country. I remember I have vivid memories of being like 6, 7 years old. This is pre 9/11, going with my dad down into LA operations for Legacy Airlines, and standing out on the tarmac and looking up and seeing, you name the airplane, and it was around us, and that's one of my fondest memories I have, is being able to do that with my dad. So my journey started basically from there. Once I turned 18, my dad actually bought me, as a graduation gift, was getting my private license. And I ended up getting my private license by, funny story, I actually wanted to get it on 9/11/2006, but I had a scheduling conflict and ended up getting on 9/12/2006.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that in the airplane, and what a great way to thumb your nose at those individuals that decided to make trouble on our soil.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was basically a big, I'll call it a middle finger to those guys, because at the end of the day, that's what it was. But no, I got my license 2006 and decided to do what every 19-year-old kid wants to do, and not focus on anything in life. So I hemmed and hawed for about another year and a half until I decided to take a pause from everything and enlist into the Navy. I did 6 years on active duty, and by the time I got out, I was living in San Diego, and I'd found a flight school down in San Diego that took the GI Bill and basically did a fast track without being a fast track, attached to a college, to get me through all my ratings. So I used my GI Bill, got through my commercial license before I had to deploy in the reserves to Africa. Deployed to Africa for, I think it was 8 months, came home 3 days before Christmas. And then after I came back home, that's when I started working on my CFI, and been a CFI since 2018.
Yeah, and we've heard a little bit about your journey from our previous show that we did together, and it was a first for me, this recording from the inside of a Cessna 172 in flight, and it was a lot of fun, and I just want to say thank you for that. And for anybody that's interested for that, just go back and take a look at Flight 98 of the Squawk Ident podcast, 5G and Discovery flights. Now, Alex, your GI Bill is something that, is it every enlisted officer in the Navy, or every enlisted person in the Navy has access to? Is that right?
And I just want to jump in real quick, which is a great question, and I'm looking forward to the answer. But just, don't discount yourself, Alex. 19-year-old that goes back and decides to take a break from anything. Going into the Navy is an admirable thing to do. For all you listeners out there, there are some great benefits to that as well, of which the GI Bill is one of them. But I commend you for your service. There are a lot of late teenagers that choose to go into the armed forces because they might lack some direction, but it is a very admirable way to go. And in no way would I suggest that was because you were lost. And so I just wanted to throw that in there, and thank you for your service. Before you answer the relevant question for our podcast, which is how the GI Bill is a great way to go for all kinds of training, but specifically for us for flight training.
Well, no, I appreciate the kind words there. I really do. It's, I do thank you guys for your support, right? Because, joining into the military, it's for you guys. Well, not just you guys, but everybody else in the country, right? Like we're out there. Yeah. At all. We're out there, on the front lines, and, maybe on a big metal floaty thing in the middle of the ocean, but we're still out there, defending freedom.
Yeah. And you do it, as they call it, a service. You serve our country. But more than that, it's a service to our freedom, our liberties, the fact that we can get in a car, feel safe, go to work, have a family, know that our kids are safe at home, know that, for the most part, all of the freedoms and the services that our countries and our communities provide, they're protected by the individuals that volunteer in this country to be in our armed services. And Roger, man, you hit the nail on the head. And I just, before you go on, Alex, I too want to say thank you to you for your sacrifice. And, to circle back to the GI Bill, I was not in the armed services. My wife was. She was an Army vet, and she used her GI Bill also. She used it to receive a culinary school certificate. So she did it for that. Now you did it for aviation. What's that process like? You serve a minimum of 4 years and you automatically get a GI Bill, or how does it work?
So it's 36 months you have to serve on active duty. For the reservists, it's a little bit different. So I've obviously played both sides of the coins, being active duty and the reserves. The people that I know in the reserves, it's tougher for them to get their full benefits of the GI Bill because you have to serve 36 months on active duty. So if you do a normal enlisted contract, go active, and 4 years and you're done, you get entitled to use the GI Bill. And there's two different GI Bills in today's world. One is the traditional Montgomery GI Bill, which everybody kind of knows. That's the traditional way, like they pay for school or a vocation or whatnot. And I believe for flying right now, it's they do 60%. So you pay out of pocket for the full 100, and they reimburse you the 60%, which isn't terrible. But the other way that you can do it is use the post 9/11 GI Bill, and that's more for college type level courses. It's the one that I ended up using mainly because it was tied. My flight training was tied in with a college, which made it a little easier to pay for, and everything was 100% taken care of between the GI Bill and Yellow Ribbon. Yellow Ribbon is colleges that participate. Basically the college says the GI Bill only pays for this much. Well, the yellow ribbon says we'll take up the slack. The college takes up the rest of the slack to cover you. So, and on top of all that, you get paid a monthly stipend for living expenses. So that's how I was able to use my GI Bill towards my flying. Was it was all tied in with a college program, which I ended up not completing because of deployments and life, basically.
Yeah.
But I got to the point where I got through my commercial single before I deployed.
I see. Now, and I'm familiar with this, even at home in my family, my wife was in college and on reserve. Actually, she was in the Army Reserves after she got out of her time and active. And they ended up pulling her out of her classes for a deployment. And it's tough to just drop everything in your life to go. And this is part of that sacrifice that we're talking about. And so, but when you came back from your deployment, you picked up where you left off and worked on your CFI. Was that also in the San Diego area?
At that point, I was living back in Temecula, my hometown. I moved back home. I actually ended up getting a divorce as I got out of active duty, and I ended up moving back into Temecula like within 6 or 7 months after the divorce was finalized, and ended up meeting my new wife in the process of all that. And by the time we were, I deployed, I'd moved back, or we'd moved into a house in Temecula together. And I ended up going to French Valley, which was like 10 minutes up the road for me to go to an airport to finish my CFI.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry to hear
yeah,
about the struggles you had there with your first marriage, but I mean, it sounds like, you were able to settle in an area and continue your dream. Was aviation, and we're going to get to your family and your background in aviation, but was it always something that you absolutely knew you wanted to do from the very beginning and you just kept pursuing it every chance you got, or it's something that that kind of just developed as you were moving forward?
I'd say a little of both, right? Because growing up in it, like obviously the development of watching my dad, watching him fly 7.3s, DC-10s. I think he was on the Mad Dog for a little while when he first joined Legacy. He flew the 7.5, 7.6, and ended up retiring off the 7.3, which is the main reason why I got into contact with you, was because one of his FOs was one of your captains.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew growing up in it, like it was always something that I could do. And by the time I got 18 and I got my first discovery flight lesson, once I got bit, the bug was in me and I knew I wanted to fly. And it just, kind of would go away and then come back. And every time that it would go away, by the time it was coming back, it came back like tenfold. So,
yeah. So as time went on and the more and more you were progressing in your journey in aviation, the feeling of the pleasure that it gave you in this, career field, what I'm hearing is you're telling me it just kept getting stronger and stronger.
100%. Now being a CFI, I was actually having this conversation with one of my students the other day. The only thing I hate about being a CFI is the fact that I have to drive an hour to go to the airport.
Ah.
I enjoy the flying aspect of it. I enjoy the teaching aspect of it, and watching these students go from having absolutely no clue of what's going on in an airplane to, obviously passing a check ride and being a licensed private pilot.
Yeah. Now, we talked about some of the common issues that flight instructors are seeing out on the line right now. Has anything changed since the last time we talked about that? Are you seeing the same kind of issues with students and kind of this overconfidence as the last time we talked about it?
I'm still seeing that with the same students that I've seen that we talked about. I'm still seeing that with. But for the most part, most of my students are super humble about it. Like aviation is a humbling experience, regardless of whatever you do, because at the end of the day, it's something that can kill you, and if you don't have that mindset going into it, that literally every time you get in that airplane, you could possibly not come back from, come back to the ground, or you do come back to the ground, just not in the way you want to. And if you have that mindset, you're going to be a good pilot, right? Like, you're going to be safe about everything because you're not going to push yourself into positions that aren't there. So I would say the ones that I still see it in, and it's, that's just going to be something that they're at this point that they're going to have to get over on their own and get humbled by the airplane.
Yeah. Yeah, and you reminded me of a very famous saying I saw on a poster in one of the FBOs that I had visited in my building time at the beginning of my career. And it was a poster on the wall, was framed, and I remember reading it, standing there, taking a look at it, reading it, and thinking to myself, wow, that's so right on and so poignant. And that quote was, "Aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any careless incapacity or neglect." And it's like you're saying, it's like you could not come home if you are not following your standard operating procedures, your SOPs, you're going through your checklist, taking your time, recognizing hazardous attitudes, trying to keep them in check. A lot of the conversations I've had this week with the myriad of very well-experienced captains that I've been flying with have been about, issues with personalities out on the flight line. And really, it all comes down to that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even still going into the big worlds, right? You still have hazardous attitudes, and it still, boils over into those worlds too, right? We teach it in the private pilot world because clearly it's still, I wouldn't say an issue, but clearly it still can happen or arise even up into the 121 or, the 135 or 91 world that, Roger flies in. And, it's something that we teach so that you can watch out and not let those attitudes cause a major mistake that you won't come back from.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Roger and I met in 2005, I want to say, or late 2005 or early 2006. And we were flight instructing together, and we shared a lot of the same students. I got to tell you, it was a pleasure for us. I know Roger feels the same way, to give instruction, to know that some small part of what you're giving to the student is going to stick with them for the rest of their life, their career, their journey. Is there a moment that you had, especially now that you're kind of towards the tail end of your flight instructing time, at least for full-time flight instructing, is there a moment that you had that really stood out among all the others?
Not one in particular. It's more of like the culmination of everybody that I've soloed. That moment when they get back from their first solo and just watching their face, watching their expression of, like, holy crap. Some of them are still cleaning up their underwear. Some of them are totally excited. But, everybody has that, just this, I can't explain the smile. They have this smile on their face that, holy crap, I just flew an airplane by myself.
Yeah.
And that to me is my favorite part of aviation, is watching the students, finally realize, like, oh my God, I'm doing this. I'm doing this without Alex actually, having him intervene for me, or, I'm doing this on my own, and, he's not there.
Yeah. Well, it's like walking that tightrope without the safety net. You've always have your safety net of your flight instructor sitting next to you, ready to slap your hand away from a control that you're not supposed to be touching at that point in time, or sitting there trying to teach you lessons on how not to get distracted by dropping that pen, or having a conversation at an inappropriate time, and breaking that sterile cockpit rule. So once you leave the cockpit and say, all right, don't mess it up, it's definitely a humbling experience.
Yeah, no, it really is. And that is the biggest thing for me, is those moments only secondarily with basically taking somebody up on their first flight in a small airplane. And, again, it's a different smile. And for those who have gone through it, they know exactly the smile that I'm talking about, right? They're just 95% of the people that come back just have this like ear to ear, big cheesy grin, and, they get bit. And, the only thing that I would say is a struggle for most people to get into aviation is just the fact that it's so expensive nowadays. If it weren't for the GI Bill, I probably wouldn't be in aviation. So I'm thankful for that. But on the flip side of that, I'm once you kind of get to the CFI level and you start having people pay you to fly, it gets a little bit easier on the cost, per flight.
I remember that, like, as a flight instructor, it was almost like soloing a student was better than somebody passing their check ride.
100%.
I don't really remember any of them anymore, period. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
There was a couple, Tony and I have kind of talked about some that I remember a little bit more than others, but even those that I flat out just don't remember half of their names anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time ago too for us as well. I mean, we're talking about
and I'm old, and
a decade.
My memory isn't what it once was. But so how many times did you feel like you were close to death with the students next to you?
Only twice.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. And how many hours do you have instructing?
Close to 1,000.
Okay, so we're actually, that's right about where I was. It was about 900. So what happened that made you wonder if you were going to make it?
Let's see. I'll go with the shorter story first, the one that I blessed Tony with on our flight. The guy, he had this fear, and you can tell, right? We went on takeoff roll. And he was one of those guys that was on the ground doing the yoke, right? Like as we're coming up to a turn, and you just see him and he starts looking like, he's going to turn left, right? And really, it's, all your feet. And after a couple of turns of doing that, and he's like, should I be doing anything?
This was the discovery flight, not a student, right? Yeah, this is
yeah. And that's exactly it. It's a discovery flight. So he's just sitting there, doing stuff, and like he looks at me and he's like, should I be doing anything? I was like, no, you sit there, right? I'll let you know when you can take over the controls, right? We'll go take off, and I'll get out to the practice area and let you take the controls out there. Well, we get out, and we had already established like what a positive exchange of controls is, and we'd gotten ready to take off, and I was in a Piper, so the trim wheel is in between us. For people that don't know where trim wheels are in Piper, right? If you're just used to a Cessna, we had gotten to take off, and we screamed down the runway, and we started climbing almost at a VX style of climb out in the Piper. And I'm just like, this is kind of weird. Like, okay, let me push forward, let me roll in trim, and push forward and roll in trim. And finally I'm getting out of trim, right? I'm running out of trim, and we're still going up like this. And so I let go, right? We're like 300 feet off the ground. I let go of the controls because, if I'm going to die, right? Like, let me at least know the reason why I'm going to die. And I let go, and I see the control yoke still back. And I'm like, what? So I look over at him, and he's got it like this. And I had to basically slap his hand to break him out of the fog, because I tried telling him to let go, right? So I had to slap him, and he let go of the airplane, and we were good from there. Got out to the practice area, and the whole time that he was flying, I swear we were flying around basically like this at 100 knots. So, but that was the second real time that I'd been scared. Because at that point we're low to the ground. Like, I've never experienced anything like that, like a student locking up on me.
Yeah, you weren't expecting it.
No,
to say the least.
Not at all.
Yeah, right.
Especially like you said, it's a discovery flight, right? Like you would not expect that from a discovery flight. Maybe a student, right? But not someone who's never been in an airplane, basically saying like, oh, let me grab the controls of this, this airplane while the instructor's trying to take off. So, and the other time that I really got scared was, I was with this. So there's a backstory to this that's kind of long and lengthy, but I'm not going to get into the whole backstory. He was a private rated, instrument rated, commercial student, right? So he clearly knows how to fly. And he had ended up crashing an airplane at another flight school when I was working up at French Valley, basically because his iPad told him he was over the airport. So he decided to land the airplane when he was about 3/4 of a mile away from the airport because his iPad said he was over the airport. Yeah, I know. I see the look you're giving me, Tony.
Is there something wrong with that?
When you're trying to look for the airport at night and you're literally just staring at your iPad going, oh, well, it says I'm right over it, so might as well just descend, right? Like, that's a logical explanation. So
terrain
so
ahead, terrain, pull up.
Approaching runway 24.
The funny thing about his crash was he ended up landing about 3/4 of a mile away from the airport that he was said to be over, and he landed on a dirt strip, which was actually not a bad landing. However, said dirt strip, the one berm that was in the dirt strip was about 300 feet after his landing roll. So he hit the berm, launched himself up into the air again, and smashed down and totaled the airplane.
Oh,
so that's the backstory, right? So he became one of our students at our flight school because you crash an airplane at another flight school at the field, you naturally move flight schools, right? So
you want to fly, so
yeah, you want to fly again, and that school, you're probably not going to ever fly with them ever again, right? So you go to a new school, right? It's the logical decision there, right? So he had been a student of another one of our instructors for probably like 3 or 4 months, or 3 or 4 weeks, and the instructor came to me and was like, I cannot get him to understand power off 180 landings and short field landings. Can you and lazy eights and a couple other commercial maneuvers, right? He's like, can you go up with him and kind of like help him out and kind of, because I can't get through to him, so maybe you can get through to him for these maneuvers.
Yeah.
So we had planned on going up and doing some pattern work that day. And before I say any of like what happened, for you two gentlemen, how do we control our airspeed in an airplane?
Pitch and power.
The thrust levers.
Okay, in a 172,
you push
how
that.
do we control?
What's a 172?
Oh, okay.
So you have power and pitch.
Small airplane.
Oh.
Small little tiny airplanes that get in your way when you're on short final and decide to break in the middle of your approach. Those airplanes, the little like annoying ones.
Yeah, I don't really see those, but anyway, continue.
So
damn caravans.
Clearly we know we control airspeed.
A clever question there.
No clever question. Like this is going back to piloting 101, right? Like you pitch for your airspeed and powers for your altitude, right? Let me rephrase it. Your throttles for your altitude. Well, we had taken off on this lap in the pattern, and we were going like 85 knots on climb out, which VY in the 172 is like 74, 75 knots. So we're like 10 knots faster, and we're gaining on the Cessna 150 that's in front of us. Like because they're going half the speed of smell, and we're going 10 knots faster than we should be. So our closure rate's starting to get there. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him like, hey, got a guy in front of us, like, slow us down. Oh, okay. So he pulls out the throttle, like 400 feet above the ground. And I just look at him, I slam the throttle forward, and I just look at him like, whenever have you done that? Like, why are you doing that? Like, have you done that any time before to slow down is to pull your throttle? No. Okay, so today is the first day that you're going to start doing that. Cool. Awesome. Let's continue. So we continue the lap in the pattern, and we do a short field landing, and touch and go, right? Nothing too exciting, right? It's touch and go. So we're in process of, cleaning up, pushing in our carb heat, pulling up our flaps, getting ready to slowly ease in our throttle so we can go back up in the air. And as the instructor, right, I do my due diligence and look at the flaps and notice that they're still down as he's adding full power and rotating.
Kind of like when you were flying with me.
Yes, 100%. So I looked and I pulled the power and I slammed us back down onto the runway, right? Because their flaps were still down. And it was like, dude, like, what are you doing? Your flaps are still down. And he points to the inside flap indicator of the 172, right? Because he's lifted up the lever and the little thing goes up with it, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, no, they're up according to that. And I'm like, no, they're not, dude. Like, look outside your window. What had happened was the actuator, it's obviously an older airplane, and the actuator started wearing out, and it didn't catch to pull the flaps up, right? It's not a big deal. It's a quick, easy maintenance fix. But the fact that he was going to rotate and go with, 40 degrees of flaps, that was the same lap in the pattern as pulling out the throttle. So I just looked at him. Clearly, we have to go see maintenance anyways. And I looked at him and I basically kind of yelled at him, like, dude, you're done. Like, we're going in. Like, get out of the airplane. Yeah. So those are the only two that really scared me. That's it.
Yeah. And hearing those stories, there are thousands of stories like this. It's part of the learning process. The reason, and we've discussed this on a previous podcast as well, the reason the FAA has changed its testing standard from the PTS, or practical test standard, to the new standard, Alex, what's it called? The ACS?
Yeah, ACS, Airman Certification Standards.
So the Airman Certification Standard is because in that new standard, there is language that the FAA has put in there that clearly states that for every part of the training, the decision-making process is now being evaluated. Whereas in the past, as long as you can complete the maneuvers within the PTS, or the practical test standards, whatever, I forget what it was, 5 degrees. It was different standard for private pilot versus commercial pilot. So, so many feet in altitude, 50 feet in altitude for commercial and 100 for private. What is it?
Nowadays, everything's the same. It's plus or minus 10, plus or minus 10, plus or minus 100, right? But they're taking the risk management into it.
Oh, so they've changed from having different standards for different certificates to now it's all one blanket standard, 10, 10, and 100. But judgment is now being evaluated. And you were telling me previously that it's not just for the test or the check ride where you're being evaluated, but every single lesson, whether that be Part 61 or Part 141 school, every single school is going to have decision-making and judgment as part of the lesson. And that is an effort to combat those individuals out there that have a desire to fly. And God bless them. They want to be a pilot. They love the idea of commanding an aircraft. But maybe they take longer, or maybe their decision-making isn't quite safe. And because it's not quite safe, they need to reevaluate either their decision to be a pilot or the process in which they are learning and moving forward. I had students back in the day that after 60 hours of flight time, they were ready for their check ride and they would pass no problem. I had other students that had 200 hours of flight time and they still weren't ready to pass their private pilot check ride. And it doesn't mean that one pilot was necessarily better than the other, especially that early in the game. But it did mean that some people needed a different approach than the standard. They needed something a little more, whether that's a little more confidence in themselves, a little more practice with hand-eye coordination with maneuvers, or maybe more studying of the rules and regulations that govern aviation, as we call the FAR-AIM, or the Federal Aviation Regulation and the Aeronautical Information Manual. The book that comes out, it is the pilot Bible, if you forgive the expression. It comes out every year. Anyone can buy one on Amazon for relatively cheap. And it reads like legalese because it is. legalese, and some people have a really hard time with that. Have you had any students, Alex, that just had a hard time following the rules?
Not really, because from like early on, obviously the stuff has changed with, like you said, from going from the PTS to ACS. So the risk management is more into our teaching style. The decision making is more embedded into our teaching style earlier in the process than it would be back in the PTS days. And it's not that people aren't having problems following the rules. It's just that some people just struggle a little bit longer, and that's the learning process. And it doesn't have anything to do with the rule process, in my opinion. The students that I've seen, there are a couple obviously standouts that like they just for whatever reason lack situational awareness, or they're not grasping it. And to those students, like, you probably should not be flying, but they still want to fly. They still want to, put money in. Like, I'm not going to stop them from flying, right? It's their dream, but at some point you may have to have a real hard conversation with them. Like, look, I know you've got 50 hours, but I really don't think this is for you anymore. You should probably, quit while you're behind.
Yeah, very true. And we're going to hear more from Alex and Captain Roger right after the break.
Roger, I do have to tell you something though. One of the guys that, oh, okay, well, well, it was you, because the bird strike that you took is still being shown at Ameriflight.
Is it?
Yes. The reason why I know that is because when I interviewed one of the guys there was at Ameriflight, and they still show your bird strike.
It's like red asphalt.
Well,
check out these images.
Go now.
That's
unreal.
Your story, to me, like, out of everybody's story, sorry Tony, I do love you, but your story, Roger, is the most inspiring to me, because you were beat up physically and emotionally and mentally throughout your whole journey, and you never gave up.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've made it to the point where I am. I guess the only reason I didn't give up is I didn't really have any other options. I tried. I mean, it just, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and there was no easy path to get there. And so it kind of became almost the easiest path to just keep doing what I was doing. But it was, it's not been pretty. I'm not going to lie.
I was going to say, we know from that bird strike picture, it wasn't pretty.
and yeah, there was definitely the graphic presentations of that in that particular instance too.
Yeah, for sure. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Well, we've been talking with Alex Daigle about being a certified flight instructor in general aviation and some of the challenges that today's flight instructors can expect out there on the flight line. But we also have some very exciting news. Now, Alex came to me, sent me an email a while back. He just reached out, went on our website and said, hey, Tony, I've been listening to the show, and you interviewed a captain that knew my father when my father was flying. He's since retired, and he gave me a little bit of a background on his father and how he was a legacy airline captain. And he flew with Kevin Elmore, a gentleman who we've had on the show more than 3 times, and for sure will be on the show again in the future, because Captain Elmore has had an amazing journey and continues to be a major part of my life. And the funny thing is, he's been a little bit of a mentor to me over at Legacy Airlines. And when Alex sent me this email saying, hey, he knew my dad, and is there any way we can kind of all get in touch, if you can reach out to him, if that's okay. And I immediately sent a text message over to Kevin and said, hey, I just was contacted by one of my listeners from the podcast that has listened to our episode that we did together, both of them. That at the time we had done 2. We've since done 3 episodes together. And he was so excited. He was like, absolutely. And so we kind of all made that happen. I feel very honored and blessed that I was part of that catalyst of that connection. And then Alex started, saying, "Hey, can I reach out and ask you some more questions?" I'm like, "Abso-freaking-lutely." And he told me how he was a flight instructor, building time. He lived in the area close to me, and we have gone back and forth. And he told me, "Hey, I got my application out at one of the regionals, and I was thinking about putting my application out over to Sandpiper," but he hesitated. And I had to set him straight. Alex, do you remember what I told you?
I don't actually.
Yeah, he said, well, you said to me, airline apps, I think only lets you send out one at a time without, you have to pay more money or something. Yeah. And I'm like, no, do not accept that. Hold on, I'll get you a phone number. So I quickly made some phone calls and I was like, sent you a text message immediately. No, you get your application in today, because I knew your history. I knew your father's history, and I knew your goal. And your goal is to, at some point, follow in his footsteps and honor him by working for the same carrier, which is Legacy Airlines. And so within 24 hours, you text me back, "Hey, guess what?"
Got an interview.
So yeah, how did that process work? How fast did that all happen from the time that I reached out to you with, here, call this number, send this email, to the time you are today, I guess I should say?
So I want to say, so when we first started talking, I was interviewing for this company called AirShare. They're kind of like a Wheels Up, just a smaller version of it. And they were based out of Kansas City. Subsequently, I didn't get that job, and I just kind of kept my nose to the grindstone and flying. I applied to Sandpiper and the gold standard regional carrier, if you will. And within Sandpiper called me back within a day and a half, and Gold Standard called me back within about a week. And I interviewed with both of them, and I received offers from both of them. But because I'm choosing to go with Sandpiper, I'll kind of continue that story rather than the Gold Standard story. So they interviewed me, or they called me up and said, "Hey, love to interview you. We'll fly you out to Texas, and you can interview at Sandpiper headquarters." And it's basically a full day interview process. And so got out there the night before, flew me on Legacy Airlines out to DFW, and got into a hotel, woke up the next morning, caught the van over to Sandpiper HQ. Was there with, I want to say like 6 or 7 different individuals, all from varying backgrounds and times. And at the time, I was only at about 1,300 hours. But because the industry is how it is right now and they're hurting, they're interviewing you at 1,300, 1,200 hours, because they know that you're obviously going to get that 1,500, and basically they want the ball rolling almost instantaneously. So when 1,500 comes around, you're pretty much like rolling right in with them.
Yeah.
So, and I interviewed, I did, I will plug one website. It is, God, now I can't even remember what it is. The interview prep website that I went to, I paid the $45 or $50 for the month. They basically go through every airline of like interview questions and jet chart questions and what you're going to look for and everything like that. Now I can't even think of what it is. But I will have to plug them, and I'll look it up and
we'll
let
put a
you know.
link in the show notes as well.
Yeah. But their questions were pretty much spot on to what was being asked in the interviews. You get the typical tell me a time wins, but the one areas that they did focus on that I had no knowledge was the jet charts area. Because as a normal flight instructor, right, we're using the government plates and using ForeFlight, stuff like that. That it's with it. So the jet charts are obviously something new to most of us, and that's kind of where they asked a lot of their questions, because that's what we're going to be using when we get to the airlines. asked some technical questions here and there, obviously some background HR questions. And then went up and waited for lunch, and after lunch and everything like that, I was the first name to be called out of the room, right? Because you basically go up to this like little conference room when you first get there. You bring all your stuff up there, bags and everything, and I was the first one to be called out. And they said, "Bring your stuff with you." And I went, kind of like let down, like, okay, well, clearly I didn't get didn't get the job because, they're having me bring all my stuff. Why would they, have me not bring my stuff if I wasn't going to get the job? And we were walking down the stairs, talking with the guy, kind of in this like kind of down attitude. And instead of walking out the front door, we hooked a right down the hallway, and they pulled me into a room and gave me the conditional letter.
Nice.
So
yeah, and how did you
fingerprinted, peed in the cup, and came back home.
Yeah, and so you never had to do any kind of simulator evaluation.
Nope.
Yeah, I've heard this, that they forego this. And now, Roger, when you were at the ExpressJet formerly, you had to do the simulator event, and then you and I both applied to, well, I don't know if you want to call it what it is, but we both applied to SkyWest back in 2006. Yeah, and we flew out together, had to get our own hotel rooms, had to get our own flights, had to go out to Denver and show up for this interview. And the interview back then was very similar. We sat in a big conference room, and there's always the one or two outliers. One guy came. Do you remember that first guy that came in, and he was wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and like unbuttoned and jeans and flip flops, and everybody
kind of blocked that whole thing from my memory.
Yeah, we were all in there in suits. Here we are, 20 somethings and 30 somethings. We're all in suits, and this guy comes in a Hawaiian shirt with sunglasses and flip flops, and he's like, "Sup, man?" Like he was asked to go home, but
I would hope he was asked to go home.
This isn't like Virgin America, what used to be Virgin America. We can say that now that they're no longer in existence. But I remember going for interviews there. The gouge was, don't wear a tie. If you wear a tie, they're going to cut it off you, because they just wanted to be different. They wanted to be hip and cool, and that's what they wanted to reflect. So they knew you read the gouge if you showed up with a business casual, with a shirt that's unbuttoned at the top, no tie, and relaxed. So it's important, as you mentioned, doing the interview prep and reading the gouges out there that are available to most people. If you have an internet connection, there's no reason why you can't be prepared to go for your interview. But it was the same for Roger and I. And after the HR interview, then there was the technical interview. We took I think it was a 50 question test or something like that for the ATP. They were asking you about tare weights and pallet sizes and all kinds of stuff that you're like, this is a regional flying CRJs, right? I'm just checking. Okay. So, and then after that, if you went and did your simulator evaluation, and I remember mine was in a Frasca portable trailer.
That Frasca thing.
Yeah, it was like a food truck, and I was like, okay, what kind of airplane is this that we're flying? And he told me, and I don't even remember what it was. I'm like, okay, well, so give me some speeds here, and maximum gear speeds and flap speeds. Oh no, don't worry about any of that stuff. That's not what we're evaluating you on. It was not a good experience for me, Roger. I won't speak for you, but let's just say neither of us got invited to return.
Neither of us got invited to join SkyWest that year.
Yeah. I said, thanks for coming in. You can try again in 6 months. And I applied at the Sandpiper as soon as we got back. And that was Friday night at around 10 o'clock at night. I got online. Airline Apps was the place to be to do that. And then Saturday morning, I got a phone call from Dallas, Texas. I'm like, what's this? Hi, we got your we got your resume. You want to come in for an interview? We'd like to fly you out tomorrow. We'll pay for the flight. Oh, okay. That was Sunday. I checked into the hotel, and Monday morning hopped on the van and brought all my stuff with me and went to their HQ, which is a different location back then, but now they're a nice new independent location. And did the same kind of interview you did, but it was a 2-day event. And if you passed the first day, on the second day, they asked you to come back. They gave you another hotel room. And then you would sit in the Fokker simulator, full motion simulator. Same thing. They just wanted to see that you could fly the airplane using digital displays. And as long as you could do that, you were golden. So it sounds like in today's marketplace, a lot of that technical evaluation has been put aside because of the need for pilots in the industry. Now, your interview at Sandpiper, what was the hardest question they asked you?
Trying to find the takeoff distance on a jet chart.
Oh,
the other questions were, I mean, they were simplistic, advanced questions, right? Like, how does the basic theory of a jet engine work? Like, what's the, what can you get off of the bleed air? What can that run for you? How, like I said, super basic questions for the advanced stuff. And then like the jet charts was kind of the more difficult questions because, clearly not seeing any of that stuff other than reading the gouge that I got, that was where I struggled. Yeah. But the guy kind of, he asked me one question and I couldn't find out where the answer was. So he asked me a different question, which ended up drawing me towards where the answer to the previous question was. And then he asked me that question again and I answered that question.
Oh, okay. So and I could tell you this, when times are good, and the times have been good for many years now, even throughout the whole COVID thing, they really do want you there. They took, especially if it's a company that paid to get you on, non-revved you out to or positive spaced you, actually, not out to their facility, put you up in a hotel, they want you there. At that, if they called you for an interview, it's your job to lose. The job is yours. That is the attitude. And I can tell you this, if Kyle was here, he'd tell you the same thing. By the time they call you in for an interview, the job is yours and it's yours to lose. And the only way you're going to lose it is to go unprepared, have the wrong attitude, or just lack the knowledge that is the basic knowledge that you're supposed to have at that point.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Close a shade.
I'm going to butt in and say that I somewhat disagree, actually.
Oh, yeah?
This coming from a guy that's gone through three interviews now that I have not been offered the job. You kind of brought up SkyWest in your whole, Alex, about the theory of a jet engine. I don't really remember a lot about the initial SkyWest interview, which was the first interview that I went to, that I had. Obviously, Tony was just talking about that. I remember I was kind of in trouble at that interview when they asked me to draw a jet engine. Now, not only number one, can I not draw? And number two, I was like, you do realize that I'm flying a Cessna 172. Like, I don't really know. Now, I guess my question, does that make me unprepared? Is that going to make me ill-prepared or unprepared to then go fly for SkyWest Airlines? And I guess maybe now, even then, I think I have the self-confidence in myself to say that, I don't think that that's a great indicator about, the job being mine to lose. To a certain degree, I think that is the truth. But it's much more complex than that. And so I can say for all the people that are out there that either have gone through this process and these two blokes here have made you feel like crap. I've been through it. I can count 3 at least that I have interviewed for and I did not get the job. And it's also a kind of an element of timing as well. Tony and I were just talking about the SkyWest interview. I don't think that was being unprepared. I think that at that point in time, we were a little less experienced than some of the other people that were in there, and they didn't need to take the amount of people that they do now. I think that if Tony and I went back with the exact same experience and went and interviewed at any regional right now, that we would probably both be hired, even if we gave the exact same answers. It's just that things are different depending on when you happen to go for your interview. And it's kind of funny just reliving some of that. Tony came back. If you want to look at it's a single event where our paths diverged in this industry. We got back and he tried again and applied at Sandpiper, and I went the path less traveled. You can argue one way or another whether that was good or not, but it's just it's luck of the draw. I got furloughed from ExpressJet. I interviewed at another regional, Compass, which I don't think they're around. I think COVID did them in as well.
Yep.
I interviewed at Compass and I did not get that job, and that was coming straight out of ExpressJet. And I've also interviewed at Frontier. I interviewed at Frontier and I did not get that job. Now I can make some fairly educated guesses as to why, but I don't really think it was because it was unprepared. It was unprepared, or that that it was my job that I lost. Although to some degree the Compass might have been true. I probably went in just thinking I was going to get that job.
Well, I think
it's much more complex than just because you get an interview. These companies hire people knowing they're not going to hire everybody, and that's where I kind of diverge a little bit from your guys' outlook. Is that most of these companies, they know that they're not going to hire 100% of the people that come through. And so, take heart. Most companies encourage you to apply 6 months. Most people, Southwest being a huge example of this. Today might be a little bit different, but several years ago when everyone wanted to go to SkyWest, they encourage you to come back, and they would flat out tell you that your chances of actually getting the job offer the second, and sometimes for some people even the third time around, are that much greater. Don't lose heart. It's sometimes yes, we make mistakes, and sometimes yes, it is our fault, and sometimes yes, we lose the job on our own, but not all the time. Take heart. There is a job out there, even if it's 6 months, and it's not always you and your shortcomings, if you will.
Well, I thank you for saying that, Roger. I didn't mean to make it sound like if you don't get the job, it's because you weren't prepared. But like we said, it is very cyclical, this industry. And when you and I both went to SkyWest and both got turned down letters, I don't think it was because
very different.
I don't think it was because you and I weren't prepared. I think with our experience, we were above and beyond prepared. But we later found out that they were looking for people with turbine time. They were looking for people that had.
It was just a different time. And is that they had the amount of people that they had to choose from, the amount of slots they had to fill, and the amount of people that they had to choose from to fill those slots was a much different dynamic in the supply and demand world than it is now.
Yeah, and the way the market is right now, at the time of this broadcast, they're going to be hiring not just at the regional level, but at the legacy carrier and mainline airlines. What they're talking thousands every year, and that means, it's a cyclical industry. They're going to kind of lower their standards because they need to fill whatever quota they have put on themselves. And if you go in, if you get interviewed, I do think that their chances are good if you go prepared and you have the experience that they're looking for and you have the right attitude. Sometimes the attitude is more important than your knowledge. And yes. I'd venture to say,
in the end, that's why I don't think I got that Compass job, because I think that I went in, I was young and stupid at that point in time, and I just kind of had that assumption that I was going to get this, I had this preferential interview. I had just gotten furloughed. We know that he can pass 121. And I think that probably showed at the tender age of 24 or 25, I think I was at the time. The attitude is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. If they see you have a good attitude, so you might get a couple questions wrong when looking at a JEP chart that you don't normally use because you're using NOS charts or the National Aviation charts or whatever, their system charts. I think your chances are good right now with aviation and with airline jobs. Yeah.
Tony, you've been on what, 2 interviews?
I've had 2 interviews in my entire career, and I was hired at 1 carrier, and yes, in my career.
I have flown and been rejected from more jobs than you have even bothered applying for.
Yeah, and
feeling pretty good about myself right now. Feeling good.
and that's part of the
Well done,
reason
Roger.
that,
Wow.
not just with Alex asking the question, but with some of the other people that I have spoken with over the years and mentored. They ask me, where should I, I was offered a job here, but they also offered me a job there. Which one should I go to? And I'm always asked the question, well, number one, what's your end goal? How can you get to that end goal quicker? Because we live in a seniority-based career field. That's what airlines are, and not just airlines, but pretty much any operator. A 135 operator, the same. It's like how long the most senior pilot gets the best schedule, gets the best aircraft, everything. So what the end goal is very important on knowing where to start. Now, just because you start at point A and your buddy over there with the exact same experience starts at point B, it's a crapshoot. You'll never know where you're going to end up. But because of what you said, Roger, I've had one job interview, and I have been able to, through nothing but fortune and just playing my cards right, being in the right place at the right time, I was able to use that through a flow-through agreement that was not even existing at the time that I got hired. I was able to come on to a mainline carrier. That was my dream job. And that's part of the advice I also gave Alex is, you could go to one of these other regional carriers, but then you're going to have to, manipulate your decisions as the time comes and interview again and again and again until you end up where you want. And every single stepstone you take, you start from ground zero. What most people don't realize is when you get a job at an airline, if you switch company, you start from ground zero, bottom of the seniority list, bottom of the pay scale, bottom schedule opportunities. You'll have to probably be on reserve for a long time. You'll probably have to get a crash pad at some weird city that you don't live anywhere near because you're at the bottom of the seniority list. It doesn't act, it's not the same as like being an experienced mechanic or plumber or electrician or some other trade where, hey, if you're a 20-year plumber and you decide to go work for a different company, their union is going to ensure, their Teamsters are going to ensure that you get paid according to your experience. That does not exist in the airline industry. And unless you're in a 135 operation or a Part 91 operation where you know someone and they go, well, with your experience and how many type ratings we're going to give you, we're going to start you here. But at an airline, at a 121 operator, it doesn't exist. It's all about data hire and your seniority, your relative seniority. So if I go work for one regional and decide 2 years into it, that regional over there is giving better bonuses, I'm going to go over there. You don't carry anything over. You start over as a new hire day one, regardless of your experience. That's why I always find the journey of today's aviators so interesting. I could be flying next to a person like my captain right now. Here we are in Honolulu. He used to fly for Aloha. He used to fly for cargo companies. He used to fly all these different outfits, all these different aircraft. And I'm like, man, your experience is amazing. And he's been at Legacy Airlines for over 25 years or 30 years. It's just an amazing history. Whereas the next captain I fly with might be a flow-through like myself who had one interview in his entire life. So you never know who you're sitting next to. And that's part of the fantastic discovery of today's aviators and their journeys.
Well, and one of the things that it still kind of gets me for today, if a pilot gets furloughed from, say Legacy Airlines, it's not like they can just go pick up and go to, Acme Air or, a different major carrier, right? And basically go apply. If one airline's furloughing, 90% chance that all the other airlines are furloughed.
Yeah.
So, you can't just you're an accountant and you lose your job at, XYZ accounting company. You can go work for ABC because ABC's hiring, even though XYZ is downsizing.
Right.
It doesn't work like that in the airline industry. And that's the hard part of the cyclical nature of it all is when it's down for everybody.
Yeah. Now your interview experience, it sounds like it was very positive. You were the first one out of the room. They invited you. They gave you the conditional letter. Tell us about that. What is a conditional letter of employment?
So basically, what it said was that we're going to hire you, barring any major thing from your background check. If anything comes up that I hit accidents, or I had a DUI or something like that is hidden in my record, because they're going to pull from the National Driver's License Registry.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to pull from the FAA registry, and basically look into you. And from there, once you kind of meet all the wickets from that, and you get the humana from the background check, then your packet gets sent to what's called the captain's review board. And that's where the captains review it. It's like 3 or 4 of them look at your packet and basically say yay or nay. And then after that, that's when you get the true conditional letter of employment. That's kind of the position of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Now you were telling me you've got some exciting dates coming up. So you've reached close to your 1,500 hours, and instead of having to wait for your full 1,500 hours, what news have you recently received?
So I talked with Sandpiper and their recruiting team. I guess it's called the class prep team at this point. And they had told me that they want me to have 1460 before they will schedule me going into the ATP CTP and then orientation into the airline. So I'm 2 hours away from 1460. I'll have it tomorrow, actually, when I go back to work. So they got me scheduled for the ATP CTP course, which is required now by the FARs to complete to get your ATP written, which is going to be out in Dallas area. It's actually run by ATP Jet School in the Dallas area, and it's basically a week-long course that they send you to get you through. I want to say the basics. I got the schedule in an email. It's the basics of jet transition, right? Your high-speed aerodynamics, your weather up at altitude versus normal weather.
Yeah.
Airport operations. Like I said, it's not specific to the 121 world because they can't make it specific, right, in the sense that it's they have to genericize it, if that's even a word, to get you through the basics. And then you sit in a sim for 3 days. So it's 4 days of ground, 3 days of sim. And then after that, you're good you meet the wickets to take the written.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing that. I leave for Dallas on the 15th. I'm there the 16th through, I think it's the 24th, because that's when they're going to schedule me for my written. And it's actually kind of cool that one of my instructors that I work with, he's going to be going to the Gold Standard Regional, and he's going to be in the same class that I'm in.
Yeah.
So
well, that's exciting, and you're going to know someone in the class. That'll help alleviate some of the stress involved with any kind of jeopardy event, is what we call them in the airline industry. Anytime you go to the training department and you're going to be taking some kind of evaluation, whether that's a written test or a simulator, a test of some kind, an exam, or what we call check rides or line checks, anything like that, an evaluation, it's a jeopardy event because those are pass, incomplete, or fail. Those are the only 3 things that come out of that. If you pass, you pass. It doesn't matter if you pass by 100% or whatever the pass rate is, 82%, whatever it is. Passing is passing. Then there's incomplete. That usually happens when either A, you've done everything according to the standard, but because you might have to have repeated 1 or 2 things, which is allowed in most cases, then maybe you ran out of time for the scheduled allotted time that you had. So the instructor or examiner will then consider it incomplete. It's not a failure. It's just not finished. And then you'll schedule another time to come back to complete whatever is left in the examination. And then the last and final one is a fail. Now, most people have had at least one failure of a check ride or a stage check, or they failed something and had to repeat it, or even just failed a lesson and had to repeat a lesson. And it's okay. Life goes on. I failed a check ride. When the Colgan crash happened, the FAA and Congress both enacted this ATP rule, the 1,500-hour rule. Before then, it didn't exist. All you had to have to work at a regional airline or at any airline and be an FO is a commercial pilot rating and minimum hours that the FAA deemed necessary to sit in the right seat of an airliner. And so why go through the expense? Now, at that time, you could take your ATP written. I think it was 1,000 hours you had to have. You could take the written, and then when you had 1,500 hours, you could actually take the ATP practical test. Now it's a little bit different. Like you mentioned, you have to go through this course, has sim time. Now you have this conditional letter of hire. Who's paying for the course? Is Sandpiper paying for this for you?
Sandpiper's putting the bill up for my travel and the course through this. Most regionals today are going to foot the bill for that because it the only way to do it is either get hired with a regional or you pay it on your own. And most people aren't going to pay it on their own.
Yeah,
it's expensive. I want to say it's like $5,000 or $6,000 for this course.
Yeah, and boy, if times have changed. Now, granted, none of this was required when I was going through, but I did go to a flight school in the Phoenix area at Deer Valley International Airport. And at Deer Valley at the time, I went to a flight school that was named Pan Am Flight Academy. And I took their airline course. It was the most expensive course they had. I walked in with my private pilot license in hand, and I had about halfway through on my instrument rating when I walked in there. And because I took this airline transition course, part of it was an $8,000 add-on. And with that $8,000, you got 7 days of a mock airline ground school where we studied the systems for CRJ 200. And the school had acquired, I think it was called a Level D sim. It was a non-motion simulator with the full mock-up of the cockpit of a CRJ 200. And so it had everything but motion. So you could count it as time. And so I have a couple hours of simulator Level D sim time for a CRJ 200. But I had to go through all that as a bonus. They called it a hiring tool that is in your kit bag, so that you are now they know that you can pass a mock airline ground school, so they'll be more apt to hire you. In today's day and age, where you have to have an ATP before you even sit in the seat, it's a little bit different. Now, when I had to go through this, what they called FO or FO ATP or SIC ATP, it was you had to take the full ATP certificate, but you were restricted to the right seat. And the airline had to pull the trigger on this so quickly that they just told everyone, okay, you're going to get 1 day of ground school and 2 simulator sessions. And on the second day of your simulator session, it's your ATP. It's your exam. And their failure rate, because I was the second class to do it at Sandpiper, the failure rate was more than 70%. And we're not talking, oh, you failed a PC, you come back for some recurrent training and go up and do it again. No, you got a pink slip. So
wow.
Yeah. And I remember exactly what I did. I got flustered because my seat filler pilot, who was a sim instructor on reserve, basically, who was called in on his day off to be a seat filler for me because I didn't have a captain getting any kind of training for that day. He didn't want to be there. He made it perfectly clear. He wasn't there on any of the briefings. I'm not making excuses, it's just a fact. And during probably the first hour, I was doing a go around, an ILS to minimums, a truck on the runway, go around, typical stuff you hear in a simulator event. And I started processing through the go around, which I've done like every training event I've had since I got hired. Not a big deal, but I wasn't getting the call outs from my non-flying pilot, my pilot monitoring. And so I got flustered, and now I'm kind of looking over at him, and he's an instructor. Why is he not doing the call outs? So I'm telling him to do the calls. And in this frustration, I accidentally didn't cycle through the box, because you're not doing a regular flight. You're supposed to sequence the box so that when you shoot the approach, in the event you go missed and you go through the motions of going missed, the FMS and the guidance on your navigation will cycle through the missed approach procedure. And I had missed that in the frustration of, hey, I'm so nervous. I was nervous, probably more nervous than I've ever been on a check ride. And I just didn't feel prepared. And he was not giving me the call outs I was expecting. That threw me off. And I messed up. I did a go around. I engaged autopilot, or I had him engage the autopilot, and the airplane suddenly just banked to the left. And by the time I said, this is not right, autopilot off, I'm hand flying this departure missed approach procedure, I was already more than 7 or 8 degrees from my course, which I think the PTS was 5. So as soon as I was outside of the PTS, the simulator stopped. The check airman that was giving me the evaluation said, Tony, what happened? And I looked up, my heartbeat was in my ears, and I remember, looking at him thinking, oh, I know what happened. I didn't cycle the flight management system. I didn't cycle the flight plan. I'm like, yeah, I see what happened. I tried to hand fly it when I saw it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, but it took me a couple degrees to pull my head out and realize what was actually happening. And by that time, I kicked the autopilot off and tried to get back on course, but I was already outside. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So he had me sit in the debrief room for about 30 minutes. Then he brought the 6x6 pink piece of paper. It wasn't an incomplete. It wasn't a pass. It was a fail. And it's one of my biggest regrets. At the same time, when I got called back about 2 weeks later to do some retraining and then take this ATP check ride again, I got to tell you, that was some of the best training I had ever received. It was one-on-one training with an instructor who was the union rep for the training department. He sat me down. First thing he said to me, he goes, for the past week, you've been not sleeping and thinking that your career's over and that you're always going to have this failure that you have to explain, all this stuff. Am I right? And I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, don't worry about any of that. He's like, it happens. He goes, you've learned from it. We're going to do some training. I'm going to show you some things so that it doesn't matter who's next to you. Because he goes, I read the report. He goes, I see that, it's your ride. So you have to dictate the outcome. He goes, but I saw that you had some hurdles to overcome. And he goes, don't worry. When I'm done with you, we're gonna make it so that it doesn't matter who's flying with you. If they're dead, comatose, whatever, you're still going to be able to shoot perfect execution on whatever's left that you have to do. And sure enough, that's what we did. We spent hours in the sim working on it. And then the next day I came back and passed with flying colors and even got a couple compliments. So we all can bounce back from our tough moments in our career, our failures. We've all had them. I'm not ashamed of it. I think I came back a much stronger pilot because of it. But man, have times have changed. Now that you're going to be going through this course, what did they tell you about it? What to expect?
For this course, it's not really much of like the drink from a fire hose type thing, right? It's more of kind of like we're getting you used to terminologies and different things that you aren't seeing in the instructor realm, right? Like I don't know turbine engines other than the little bit that I've read here and there, the study gouge that I've gotten. So it's more geared to, from what I'm gathering, to steer you away from the 91 GA world and get you into the 121 world, but without getting you, like I said, getting you super generalized, super generic, like training into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So-
that should be a really positive experience for you. It'll help with the transition. And so on your first few days of new hire class, it's going to be familiar. And it's that familiarity in something that you've studied it, you're familiar with. It's not hitting you with the first time. It's not, you don't have that shock of, hey, what's this all about? That's what helps for you to succeed. It's that you're prepared, not just because you've studied it, but you physically have experienced it. That's a completely different bag to have to contend with.
Yeah. So no, it's I'm looking forward to the training. I was actually talking with my wife about it yesterday and today. Like, it's exciting. Like I'm not saying that I'm over flight instructing, right? I still enjoy the thoughts and stuff behind it, but I've been doing it for 3.5 years. It's, time for me to move on. It's airlines, right? It's natural progression. No one gets into flight instructing to flight instruct. It's always used as a stepping stone.
So, for most, but there are those that definitely that's all they want to do. I know a few of those too, and there's nothing wrong with that. I God bless them. I love flight instructing. It's definitely was a good time. Kind of the reason I became a check airman when I had that opportunity for all those years. So there's definitely a lot of positive from that. But here's the question: are you going to maintain your flight instructor certificate when the time comes, or are you going to let it lapse with the idea of I'm never doing that again?
Well, a wise aviator told me over lunch to not let it lapse. So I'm not going to let it lapse. I didn't, even before this wonderful guy that I had met told me to not let it lapse, that I had that mindset that I wasn't going to, because you never know. Like in the aviation industry, right? Again, it's cyclical, it's fickle, right? Like, what happens if I get furloughed from Sandpiper? Or what happens if I get furloughed from Legacy? Because I got the flow through agreement. Well, what can I do? Well, if my instructor is still valid, I can go back and instruct.
Yeah. On top of that, and I've met many a captain that feel the same way. Their children or friends of their children decide, hey, Dad, you've had a wonderful career in aviation. I want to be a pilot just like you. And they're like, yeah, Johnny or Susie, let me just get my flight instructor certificate reinstated. Now you're talking a lot more money. But if you keep it current and occasionally go up and rent a 172 once or twice a year just for the joy of it, or lately, I don't know what it is. It's like something in the water. I've flown with a bunch of captains that are like, yeah, I just bought an airplane, or yeah, I just bought it. We got an airplane we're restoring, or I'm about to buy an airplane. And I'm like thinking, the life of a captain.
You'll be there one day.
Someday.
Yeah. No, I will have to admit, like, my dad didn't have his flight instructor. He had his ground instructor, which that never expires.
Yeah.
So he's able to do some of the ground with me when I was going through my stuff.
Yeah.
But he never kept up with it, mainly because he instructed for like 7 years, and he was burnt out by the time he had gotten, where did he go? Golden West. It was an old commuter airline way back in the day.
Yeah.
And then, he basically he flew for them, and they closed, and he went to some accounting firm because that's where his degree was in between, airline jobs, because the industry was down in the 80s and early 80s. And he got hired on by this company called Air California, who eventually merged into what is now Legacy. So, he I don't think he would ever go back. And even talking to him, in retirement, like when he went to retire, like, are you going to fly? I don't know. Like he didn't get his medical. He had health issues later in his career. He had a heart attack, and couple of other diabetes, health issues, stuff like that. So by the time he was retiring, I think he was just really burnt out on flying and trying to keep the medical up and all that. So.
Yeah. And I remember you telling me so much about your dad. One thing you told me and actually shared with me on the day we flew together out there in Riverside was you were like, yeah, I got to go to my car. I got to show you something. And you came back and you had something in your hand that belonged to your father. It was a piece of history that he gave you. It was one of the most wonderful things that you cherish. What can you tell me about that?
I'm trying to think of what it was that he gave me.
The leather jacket.
Oh yeah, no, it's the bomber jacket that they, when everybody decided to make the transition because we're going to be cool and hip and no longer wear our blazer jackets and get rid of our hats. They went to the leather bomber jacket, and he gave me his after he retired, and it's literally his jacket with his name stitched into it and the beautiful legacy crest, the eagle crest in the back of it. And like it's one of the I have it, I cherish it. I wish that they were still wearing them because it's a beautiful piece of history that I can't wear anymore.
Well, I have good news for you, sir. Though the legacy airline did away with it for reasons beyond what we have time to discuss today, the Sandpiper airline, they also said, no, you can't wear these because that's what the main line said, and we're going to follow what they said. And the pilots came back and said, well, if you're not going to let us wear these very expensive leather bomber jackets that we bought out of our own money because it was an optional piece for the uniform, then you need to do what Legacy did and buy them back.
Yeah.
And about a week later, we got an email when I was there, and they said, we're taking back that you can continue to wear the leather bomber jacket if you care to. So unless something's changed that I don't know about, if you wanted to, you could wear it again out on the line.
Well, good. I hope that I can wear it out on the line and at the Sandpiper, and hopefully by the time that I get to Legacy, they'll obviously rethink their leather bomber jacket there.
I still think we should go back to the white uniforms and white hats like Pan Am had, because that was pretty cool. It was pretty trick, man.
Yeah. Hey, they copied Navy uniforms.
Yeah, very much, very much. I wouldn't even mind flying in a little flight suit with a bunch of pockets for my cell phones and my gadgets and my chargers and walk around.
If you've ever worn a flight suit, you never want to wear anything else. Like
pajamas.
I wore one once, and I'm like, man, like why can't we all wear this? Like, they're just, it's comfortable. It's like wearing a big pajama set. You've got pockets all over the place.
Yep. You got a little pocket down by your ankle for your little hat that folds. It's, come on, man.
Yeah. No, they're awesome.
Yeah.
But professionalism, I get it, right? What's the flight suit going to serve other than like, it's fire retardant is really the only big purpose of it, and that you can fit your G suit under it.
Well, can you imagine some of the old captains that you see around wearing a flight suit that weigh like 300 or 400 pounds?
No. The guys that have to move their seat back while you do the control checks.
Exactly. Captain, I'm gonna do a control check. Do you? Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let me roll this seat back.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
But no, I'm the industry's, it's coming back around for the way that they're, training now. It's changing, right? Because I think, and I'm not trying to say this in the wrong way. I think they're going to try to weed out the people that wouldn't necessarily pass a technical aspect of the interview, like where you and Roger were like, oh, we'll put you in the back of this food truck / flight simulator, and you have to shoot a single engine ILS in a Baron that you've never flown before, right? Like, I think they're going to try to weed those out through the normal schooling process at this point.
Yeah,
because they're hurting. Everybody's hurting, which is why they're hiring, getting interviews done at like 1,300 hours, because they want the numbers so that as it comes through, like they may hire like 100 guys, and of those 100 guys, the going into class, right, there may be weeded out like 90 left after that before they even go to class. And
yeah, the
then,
retention rate is relatively high lately. That the numbers that Kyle's been sharing with me, the retention rate has been relatively high, meaning people are a little bit more prepared, or maybe they've just really catered to, if you need extra time, we'll give you extra time, and really get everybody in. And the reason they're hiring, I think, people without the minimum times, because they want to get you before somebody else poaches you, because everybody's hiring. It's not just one or two companies. Everyone is hiring. If you thought that, hey, I always wanted to fly, but I went into a different career, now is a great time to say, hey, let's pull the trigger and do this, because by the time you're done with flight school, if it's in the next couple years, if you go to one of those 12-month programs and just, drink from the fire hose for a year, your job is almost secured unless something crazy happens,
No, and that's where we're at right now is, like, let's face it, I'm older going into this, right? I'm not a 24-year-old kid. I'll be 35 in March this year, right? Like, I'm older going through this, but I completely understand the, what's involved with it because I've grown up with it, right? So I have a little bit more of an insight than other people do. But, if you're in that mind, like where you were, you were in a completely different career field, and your wife decided to give you a discovery flight to curb your appetite for constantly looking up at airplanes. Now you can, constantly look down on people. Right.
Yep.
So like for you, you completely changed your career. What, 25, 26?
26, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you did it, other people can do it, right? Like, again, I'm 35. I'll be, going into this career a little older. So now's the time.
And people think that, and I thought that too. I mean, we all thought that, especially when you're young. You're like, oh God, I'm already behind. There's somebody younger than me. When you're young, you care about that stuff. You care about, oh, that guy's younger than me, or that gal's younger than me, and they look how much they've accomplished. When you get a little older and you realize that doesn't matter. There's time, and at the end of the day, when you're looking at your career, you look back. Yeah, there's that one or two individuals that have been flying for 40 years. And then there's a one or two individuals that are getting ready to retire, but they've only been flying for 10 years. That doesn't make their journey any less valuable than the one that's been doing it for 30 or 40. So, yeah, it's never too late.
No, it's never too late to start and change over careers, especially in the flying career. Because once you get bit by that bug, you'll never regret it.
Yeah.
So with going to Sandpiper and the bases that Sandpiper has and where you live, what is your knowledge? What is your outlook on the commute? Because as I understand it, there's not really anywhere, let's just say even remotely close to where you live now. Okay.
The closest base is DFW.
Right out of Ontario 7 or 8 times a day.
Yeah. So there is flights, and there's so where I live,
7 or 8 flights a day.
Yeah, Ontario to DFW. That's pretty much all I fly.
I didn't realize that there was that many per day, but
and out of Southern California, I can go down to San Diego, I can go up to John Wayne, I can go to LAX or Ontario. So I have 4 airports that I can really choose from. That if I miss a flight, I can get out at another airport.
Yeah.
So, but no, DFW is where I'm going to try to be based out of, right? I know it's a more senior base, but that's right. My wife and I plan on moving to Texas. We're trying to move to Texas by the end of this year, actually.
Okay. So you're actually kind of already got the plans in the works to actually make your life easier before you even start.
Yeah. We're native Californians. We've lived in California pretty much our whole lives. Actually, my wife has. I've lived in Virginia for 3 years, but it's a whole political thing, right?
You're
that
ready.
Really is. I'm overpaying for California.
I don't know. Having lived it with the commute, Tony's somewhat even worse, although he had his he had his brief heavenly experience there in LA.
Yeah. What was that, 2 years?
But I mean, the commute between Arizona and Seattle and then the Bay Area, and not necessarily in that order or whatever it was. It's definitely. I think if I could go back and do it again, I would definitely do several things differently. But I probably would have taken that aspect into account a little bit more. You know, when I went to ExpressJet, I was actually based in Ontario, but that was a short-lived thing. And then when I went back, pretty much like you, I mean, my closest base was Houston, and I was in Chicago for a while. And I mean, when you look at it over the course of an entire month, I mean, when you're looking at a 4-hour flight each way, and then taking into account, you know, riding the L from O'Hare down to Midway or Midway up to O'Hare in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Off and on for 12 years.
Like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, when you're looking at like 10 days off a month, and then you look at the time that you spent commuting, and that's another, you know, 2 or 3 or 4. You know,
It's tough.
Unfortunately, it's real.
Yeah.
Although even that, I guess, is different now with them offering hotel rooms and for commuting pilots and whatever.
The four
amazing how
commuter
fast
hotels a
changed
month.
5 or 6 years.
You get a hotel room, but Sandpiper is they're only giving you, I think, 4 hotel rooms a month.
Right. 4 commuter
that they
hotels a
pay
month.
for.
Yeah.
So
And you won't use it.
You figure you're going to have 4, maybe 5 trips on a bigger bid day, on a 31-day bid month or something. I mean, that's once a trip on either the front or the back end.
Right. Well, if you're a line holder, and you can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're sitting a line, not sitting reserved at the airport or at a crash pad.
Right.
Well, yeah, if you're on reserve, you're gonna have a crash pad. I don't know. Can you get away with that? I don't even know anymore. Maybe you're flying so much you need a crash pad.
Well, they don't have a short call, long call reserve. They just have one reserve and airport standby. So if you're the low person on the totem pole, you're going to be scheduled on your reserve days to sit airport standby, whereas you're at the airport physically on property for 8 hours and getting paid as such. And then you go back to your crash pad and hang out, and then at 5 p.m. that night, you see what you're doing the next day.
I know that it doesn't exist anymore, but this was one of the best things about ExpressJet that I always thought was horrendous for everybody else, is that airport reserve or ARC or whatever people call it. We could only do it twice a month, and it was a 4-hour period, and that was horrible. I thought that was horrible. And then there was I got in this crash pad with the down flushed or whatever GoJet guys that were from United. It's pretty much unlimited for 8 hours at a time. You go hang out at an airport, and I'm just like, say what now? But that was one of the best things about ExpressJet that I had no idea at the time. But you could only be assigned twice a month, and it was only for 4 hours, and then you were done.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm a little jealous of that.
Yeah, we had
8 hours.
That was even back 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those little cherries in the contract. It's like, well, but we have this. And then the other guy is going to have something completely different. And they're going to go, oh, that sucks. That's like, yeah, but we have that. And so every airline is going to have some kind of cherry in the contract that they are like, that's their give. And for ExpressJet, probably that was part of their give. It's like, well, you only have to do airport ready for 2 days a month.
I had no idea at the time, but looking back, I realized that, yeah, that was something that didn't come close to anybody else.
Yeah.
4 hours and twice a month? Dang.
It still sucks.
Yeah. But see, at Legacy Airlines, we don't have airport standby for the pilot group. We have something different. We have what I like to call line holder reserve. And many of you that have been listening now for a while know that what I'm talking about. Line holder reserve is you hold a line. You're a line holder. You show up, you do your trip, and you land in a base other than your own. For me, that's usually either Phoenix or Dallas or sometimes Charlotte. And on day one, you go from, for example, I went from Ontario to Dallas. And I sat for 3.5 hours. Doing what? I don't know. go
you
get a
do that
meal.
like almost every trip. I've seen some of your pairings. It's like you go and then you sit for 2.5 to 3.5 hours after every single leg.
Yeah. Now multiply that by hundreds of pilots. Now you have 100 or so pilots for that equipment type sitting there doing absolutely nothing for 3 hours, and crew scheduling can go, oh, well, that flight is late. We have an airplane in Dallas. Let's recrew it. You've been reassigned. Cha-ching! Now your phone rings. It's crew scheduling. You know what it is. And now whether or not you answer the phone depends on how much you like to be beaten across the head with a baseball bat. So you answer the phone and you say, yes, this is First Officer Tony. Hi, how are you? And they say, yeah, First Officer Tony, you've been reassigned. You are now departing on flight so-and-so, leaving from gate number so-and-so in about 35 minutes. Your overnights will now include here, here, and here. Congratulations. Have a nice day. Click. And you're like, wait, what? So the union says, you're not required to answer the phone. Let it go to voicemail. You could be taking a nap. They don't know that. So, yeah, that's what I call line holder airport ready reserve, is that 3 hour sit. We saw that over at Sandpiper, too. They used to do that at Miami when it wasn't a base, and you were ripe for reassignment. And there are certain months where I get reassigned almost every time I have one of those sits, and other months, like this month, that they haven't touched me yet. And so, knock on wood, it's...
I don't think I got. There's no way I got reassigned more than 10 times my 5-year career at ExpressJet.
Again, perks
no
of.
way.
I've been reassigned 7 times in one sequence. It's like that scene in Airplane where they're like, your aircraft is now arriving at gate 10. No, gate 11, gate 12. And it's the same. It's like, you're now doing a layover in Cincinnati. No. Champaign. No. Cleveland. No.
I've heard you told stories about that, and I never had those. I remember a couple times, but I don't know if I had 5, let alone I know I did 10.
Wow.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am.
Don't
call me Shirley.
my favorite. There wasn't a reassignment. I did have one time. It was like my second to last day of work before I quit there.
Yeah.
And I was getting off the airplane, and I had somebody there to meet me. Not for reassignment. You know what they were there for?
A piss test.
A drug test.
Yeah, I got one last week.
I got out of it. They're like, it's like, this is like my second to last day of work, but okay. They're like, yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, why pay for it if you're, yeah.
Literally, my last day of work is tomorrow, and then I am going home, and I am not coming back. I don't even remember how they knew that, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I don't know. That was...
Somebody was there to meet me.
You got lucky. I got one last week. I get off the plane in Ontario. I'd land at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. It was like some random thing.
Done?
And I was done, right? And I was getting in my car. I was going to drive home, be home in like 15 minutes. And, what every single pilot, as soon as they land, they run their parking checklist or shutdown checklist, whatever you call it at your airline. And the first thing you do is whoever needs to go to the bathroom the most, which between the two of you, you discuss it. Hey, man, I'm going to hit the head real quick. So, okay, that means you need to go really bad. So go. So the first thing you do is you open the cockpit door and you get into the bathroom and you take care of business. And then when you come out, you start packing up your stuff, and the other pilot goes to the bathroom, takes care of business. And that's the nice thing about having a lav on a narrow body or a wide body aircraft right behind the cockpit door. So you could take care of that. Now you can take your time, deplane, go get on the car and go home, or go down the van and go to the hotel, and you're not, dragging it out and having to go use the restroom up in the airport or whatever. So that's the standard operating procedure, unless the number one flight attendant, as soon as you open the door, goes, "Hey, Tony, someone's here to see you." You're like, "Oh, really?" They're like, "Yeah, you got a drug test." Oh, well, good, because at least she told me before I went to the bathroom and not after, in which case it's problems. So yeah, I ended up.
They always pulled me off in like middle of trips. It only happened a couple times, but I was like, I don't care. Like, I had an hour and a half to kill anyway. You need me to go down to the medical center down there into the bowels of Houston Hobby, intergalactical.
Get your 15 minutes of pay credit for your donation.
Yeah, we used like a meager pay credit of $30 an hour, so I got paid, I'm sure, like 58 cents to go do my whiz quiz.
There you go. So always be prepared. Never jump into the toilet right away. Always look on the jet bridge and go, make sure there's nobody there for you. Here's what can happen. The jet bridge driver is struggling. You're like, I can't hold it anymore. So, you open the cockpit door, you jump in there. You're like, you take care of business. And, you're like, oh, longest pee ever. And then you get back in the cockpit. Now you're starting to pick up all your bags. You're ready to go. And as soon as they open the door, someone's out there going, Tony, hi, congratulations. We need a sample. And you're like, I just got rid of like 5 liters of urine. Okay. Do you have a bottle of water?
Start chugging.
I have a bottle of water I can finish right now. 1.5 liters. Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we finish up today's show, gentlemen, I wanted to get your take on the most recent news that has completely flooded the industry in the past 48 hours. Recently, it was announced that Frontier and Spirit will have a blockbuster merger. That is, Frontier is buying Spirit for something like $6.2 billion. Wow. The biggest ultra low-cost carrier in the nation is going to be one. Now, we were kind of talking about names, Frontier and Spirit, and my captain kind of looked at me and said, hey, Frontier, Spirit, we're coming up with, he goes, Fear It. And I go, Fear It. I like it. And then Alex sent me a picture about a couple hours ago. Hey, look, t-shirts, Fear It.
I have an old instructor who works for Spirit Airlines, and he sent me that picture, so I had to naturally forward it on to you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it. Now, what we're talking about here, this is an article. I have the link in the show notes for you. It's from The Points Guy, a very reputable aviation news outlet, and it's entitled Frontier Spirit Announced Blockbuster Merger That Will Create the Giant Ultra-Low-Cost Airline by David Slotnick, and this was posted 2 days ago, so on the 7th of February. Frontier and Spirit Airlines unveiled this blockbuster merger on Monday, announcing plans to combine operations and fly as a single company. The move marries 2 ultra-low-cost carriers that have complementary fleets and route networks. It approved it, and it would create this ultra-low-cost juggernaut, as he puts it, that would dominate the segment in the U.S. Monday's announcement gave few details on customers facing makeup of the new airline, including whether Frontier and Spirit will continue to exist as separate brands, combined under one of the existing brands, or combined under a new airline entirely. Spirit CEO Ted Christie said in an appearance on CNBC on Monday that the combined company's name and headquarters location will be revealed in due time. So, hey, this is kind of not really surprising. Us pilots have always said that, these ultra low cost guys would at one point probably merge or buy each other out or something to keep the competition low. And that's exactly what's happening here. The Frontier Airline equity holders will own roughly 51.5% of the combined airline, whereas Spirit will own the remaining 48.5% after closing. So what does this mean for the aviation industry, namely airline pilots? Mergers are a very touchy subject. Each one is unique in how it treats its employees. Now, you can imagine, here at Legacy, we've survived multiple mergers, multiple buyouts, multiple combination of seniority lists. What do you see is ahead for Frontier and Spirit if history has taught us anything? Roger, let's start with you.
Well, I think that, those two combining it's a juggernaut is one way to put it. The thing with Spirit and Frontier, say what you want about them, but they have the largest amount of growth potential because they are flying a different demographic that previously has not been, the air travel has not really been open to them. And the amount of growth that is possible at that level is absolutely humongous because it's actually a new market. The rest of the airlines, the legacy airlines as a whole, they're all pretty much fighting over the same customers they've been fighting over for the past 20 to 30 years. And so this is something that's kind of different. I do wonder, I'm definitely not an expert on it. I do wonder from an antitrust perspective if there's going to be some concerns raised over this. Because if you think about the ultra low cost carrier segment, um, what airlines come to mind? Typically, you've got Frontier and you've got Spirit, and then some people will come out with Allegiant. But I think Allegiant is what's going to is kind of going to be trampled underfoot. In which case, I think that Allegiant is going to be the big loser in this. I don't know how they're going to be able to survive against such a big company that's going to have the economies of scale um, to go up against that. And that's why I wonder where that if there's going to be some antitrust concerns. Um, Frontier, I've flown on them. They're not my preferred airline, but I'm coming from I've traveled a whole lot because I've commuted, and it's definitely a no frills. But to their credit, they pretty much they don't sell you on something that doesn't exist. You kind of know what you're getting into, and you need to understand that going into it. And for the fares that you pay, they offer a product that a lot of people are willing to pay for.
Yeah.
But the two of those companies getting together, that's definitely a juggernaut of an airline with a lot of growth potential.
Speaking of growth potential, both airlines exclusively operate the Airbus A320 family of aircraft, making for a relatively easy task of integrating the two airlines' fleets. The two carriers combined have 354 new aircraft orders as of December 31st. According to Airbus, 354 new aircraft orders. The airlines are scheduled to take delivery of the new aircraft through the year 2026. It's not very far, 4 years away, growing the combined fleet size by 75%, according to the airlines, from 283 aircraft in 2021 to 493 by the end of 2026. Jobs, and jobs.
Let's vote for jobs.
And I know that they've got those on order, and I like I actually mentioned earlier in this podcast, I interviewed at Frontier, and this was about 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about growth even back then, and so I know what their plans are. I wonder how much they're going to be able to do. Just like I said, I know that there's a huge untapped potential there, but if you look at they've already pulled out of some airports because of high cost. San Jose, some of the New York airports, just because those airports charge a lot of money, and so if you're not going to fly to the bigger airports, you're going to fly to the smaller airports. But once you start flying to the smaller airports, you're also taken from a much smaller pool of people. And so I do wonder how many of those orders will actually come to fruition. But at the same time, they're going to take airplanes, and they will be peddling the fact that you come to our airline now, and I mean, even without any attrition of any kind, when the airline itself is going to double, you're a captain.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you got hired today.
Zero attrition.
You will be a captain in, 4 years?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you have twice as many airplanes.
Now, that's if everything comes to fruition on the time schedule.
Which I kind of have some, it's the airline issue. I have my doubts about. But still, I mean, even if it grows by 30%, which I think it will grow more than 30. I think it will be less than the 75%, but way more than 30. And, somewhere in the middle, 40 to 50%, you're still... I mean, from a relative seniority standpoint, you're an Airbus captain, and a lot of these guys are getting hired in their late 20s.
Yeah. Now, hearing this news, Alex, now here you are getting ready to go to your first 121 operator. Does that make you doubt your decision and think maybe I should have put in my application at Frontier and Spirit?
No, I still think, where I'm at kind of, let's face it, everybody needs that turbine time. Like even going to Frontier or Spirit, like you're still going to need turbine time to go to. I'm not going to give them the due credit of calling them a major carrier, right? They're a low cost carrier at the end of the day, and they're just this side of a regional airline because they go to a little bit bigger cities than your regional carriers would, but they still require turbine time, which
yes and no.
have a whole whopping half hour of. Like I don't have much turbine time or turbine PIC time. So
yeah, they prefer it,
as
but
it stands,
it's not a requirement. Frontier has hired a general aviation certified flight instructor with thousands of hours of flight instructing under his belt, and he's a new hire on the Airbus. Zero turbine time experience prior, but that's an anomaly, an outlier. Who knows what the actual progression of qualifications were. But it's exciting to hear all of these job opportunities for this. And like you said, it's smart what you're saying, and I'm not didn't expect anything different really from you. You still need to get your experience. You still need to be competitive in the market. And it's funny because we talk about this phrase called the thrill of the polyester. A lot of us have felt that, especially in our early age in this industry. We want to chase that turbine time, chase that PIC, chase that fourth stripe as quickly as possible so that we can then have the options to go to the bigger and better places. And for a lot of people, they still feel that way. And I see a lot of people probably doing some lateral moves here and start putting in their application.
Well, and that's where I feel like, yes, I know Sandpiper's got the guaranteed flow through to Legacy. And at the end of the day, for me, like, I would love to work for Legacy Airlines, right? To be a Legacy pilot like my dad was, right? Like I'm a Legacy. So, but I'm also not going to say no to other airlines. You know what I mean? If I'm coming up to, like, if I'm at Sandpiper 2-3 years from now and I'm sitting in the left seat, as a captain and building my PIC time, and I see the contract that gets negotiated out of this at Frontier or at Fearit, that, like, if it looks better than what I'm at, then yeah, I may do a lateral move. Or I'm not discrediting any airline, because at the end of the day, you're still flying an airplane. It doesn't matter whose wings you have on you, right? Like, we're all pilots. So, but yeah, I'd love to be at American, but again, Fearit's not going to be a bad one, right? I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no to United. I'm not going to say no to Delta, Southwest, any of them, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still a flying job, and that's what I want.
Any pilot that you ask, if they're being honest, 100% of them will tell you, if you ask them, why do you work for the airline you work for, they'll tell you the same thing. Because they're the ones that hired me.
And that's how I feel.
Yeah. So now, and Roger, you mentioned the possibility of antitrust being an issue with this merger, and possibly 75% is a little bit bold of a statement. But the Biden administration has previously given indications of reluctance to approve mergers and coordination in the airline sector. In 2021, the Department of Justice filed an antitrust suit against American Airlines and JetBlue, alleging that their Northeast Alliance, as they called it, amounted to unfair and uncompetitive practices. So American and JetBlue have argued that by coordinating in the Northeast, they can better compete against the entrenched airlines that Delta and United pose in that sector. It's possible that Spirit and Frontier will use a similar argument. The combined airline would be the 5th largest in the U.S., behind only American, United, Delta, and Southwest. It appears likely that they will argue that the combined size will allow them to compete against the majors, driving fares down across the board. So there's a precedent.
Which I think I would have a hard time going with that argument because of what I said. I mean, I fully expect that there should be, I know about the American and the JetBlue deal, that there was some antitrust. I mean, that's small potatoes compared to those two airlines getting together. But at the same time, the argument that you kind of just raised, that we're going to better compete. You're not competing. I still don't think that you're competing for the same passengers. No. You can't. If I'm going to charge $30 a ticket to go between, we'll just DFW and Albuquerque, New Mexico. We'll just pick a couple cities, and you're going to charge $30 versus $150 for a basic economy ticket in the back of an American or United going from Dallas or from Houston. You're not advertising to the same demographic. And so I don't think, like, how is that going to affect competition? Really, you're just squashing allegiance.
Well, you're taking away. your competition, which would be Allegiant and some of the other Sun Country and all
your
the other.
competition right now is with Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant, and now all of a sudden you take the bigger two of the three, and that you're squashing one of them.
Yeah.
But not really competing with the majors because I don't think that is the same demographic. Now that is from a stupid pilot. Don't get me wrong. I don't know anything. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know really anything about antitrust or anything. But this, to me, well, I can totally see why those two airlines would want to get together because I think there's fistfuls of money to be made.
Mm-hmm.
I think that from a government perspective, they're going to probably look at this and go, we need to take a look at this and make sure that the consumer is not going to get hosed by this. Because I would also, if I was Spirit and Frontier, knowing that I'm squashing Allegiant, I can increase my fares by $10. Now, we look at that, an increase of $10 and go, yeah, that's not that big a deal. But when you're charging $30 a ticket, all of a sudden you're increasing your fares by 33%.
Yeah.
Your profit margins, there's a lot of money to be made there when you look at that from a percentage standpoint.
And we will call this operation Preparation H.
And like I said, more power to them. You know, capitalism isn't great, but it's kind of the best thing that we have, and they're going to try and figure that out. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody says, okay, hold on, let's take a look at this and how this is going to affect the American consumer.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with Roger on what he's saying that, like, you know, the three, like, ultra low cost of Allegiant, Spirit, and Frontier, right? You're going to take two of those three and merge them. Now you're going to squash out Allegiant. Allegiant's going to basically have probably a zero footprint on the market, right? You're going to put them up now as the fifth largest airline in the U.S. on par with the majors, right behind Southwest. And now their competition is going to be Southwest. And
then they'll have their eyes on Southwest, and that will drive Southwest already low cost prices closer to the ultra low cost. But then, like what Roger said, it's also going to raise the ultra low cost prices up, which will do fantastic for their stock, which will reward all the executives and the stockholders of those two companies because they're going to dominate the market.
But see, that becomes the argument in favor of letting the merger. If you're going to allow them and think that they're going to be able to compete with Southwest, and you're going to decrease the cost of Southwest, that's going to be a win for a lot of people. If you've got the fourth and fifth largest U.S. carriers that are vying for the same passengers, I still don't really think that Southwest and Spirit, as you say, are going to be vying for the same passengers. I just don't really see that being the case, which is why I think that argument isn't going to necessarily hold a lot of water.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing that I could see happening out of all this, say the merger happens, and it goes into squashes out Allegiant and all this. Well, now you're going to get the top four, right, of American, United, Delta, and Southwest starting to look at the practices that Frontier and Spirit are doing of, like, doing the ultra low cost, which is why they can keep their tickets so low. Putting some of those practices into some of the major legacies.
Yeah, it will definitely affect everyone involved. I personally think, and granted, I don't have a background in marketing or business management, but I personally think that if companies like American or Delta, United, the top three, kind of looked at it and said, well, you guys go do your thing. We're going to keep our prices competitive, fair, but what we're going to offer is a safe atmosphere where you don't have to worry about fights breaking out at the gate and in the airplane because we're going to...
That's a losing argument. You guys have so many problems over there.
Well, I hate to disagree with you, Roger, but we may have some problems over at the Legacy Airlines.
Everybody does. I mean, that's not any airline. That's every airline.
Look at the numbers. Look at the statistics. The police don't even respond to calls anymore at the airport at those gates. They just let them do their thing and fight. I honestly think that it's time that we promote that the experience that you get, the level of professionalism and quality. We need to go back to the vintage days of flying where you got that meal that's fresh hand carved meats on the little cart with the caviar and the cheese tray, and bring that shit back. That stuff is what sold airplane tickets back in the day for the ultra rich. And it was only after deregulation where it was deemed that, hey, flying shouldn't be just for the ultra rich, it should be for everyone. And that really, degraded the experience. Who's to say whether it was right or wrong to do so? But it's just this downward spiral, and we have to stop it. We have to stop. You should dress up to go on the airplane, not wear your pajamas and your tank top that says F you on it, and you got kids around and got your boobs sticking out. Or my favorite is I've had 3 experiences in the last 6 months where passengers said, I can't sit down during the flight because I just had my butt implants put in, and I have to stand during the flight. And it's like, well, yeah, sorry.
Go fly Ryanair.
Oh, God help us. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you on board today with this discussion. To learn about Alex's journey, to have you on today was an absolute honor. Thank you, sir, for sharing that with us. Roger, always a privilege to get your insight. I love the fact that you give us a hard time, and still bring us. Yeah, you keep us in line, and I do appreciate that sincerely. So I also want to thank Captain Roger and Alex and all of you for coming along on this flight with us. As we are starting our initial descent into the podcast airport, I want to just say thank you for listening to Squawk Ident. Please help us out by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe or follow to the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, we love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even an audio feedback. You can record something on your phone and just send it to this email address that we have. That's aviatortony@gmail.com, or you can go to our website and follow the link at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. You can also contribute to the show financially right from the homepage. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident. One big final thank you again to my guests today, Alex, and my co-host, Captain Roger. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Where's the button? Hold on. How to find the button?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.